In early March 2026, Nairobi woke up to a tragedy. After a night of intense rainfall, flood waters swept through several parts of the city, leaving more than 40 people dead and many families devastated. Extreme storms like these are becoming more frequent across East Africa, and the weather itself is beyond the control of any city government. But the floods exposed something deeper. Because the rain was only part of the story, what turned a storm into a disaster were problems Nairobi has struggled with for decades. Stormwater drains clogged by waste and sediment that prevent water from flowing out of the city fast enough. Buildings and informal settlements slowly encroaching onto riverbanks and floodplains that once absorbed excess water. And years of rapid urban growth that has stretched Nairobi's infrastructure far beyond what it was originally designed to handle. In many ways, the floods became a snapshot of Nairobi's larger reality, a modern African capital, trying to function on systems built for a much smaller city. And that brings us to a political paradox now unfolding in Nairobi, because long before the floods, Governor Johnson Sakaja had already begun confronting some of the structural problems that make the city difficult to manage. Central among those problems was congestion in the central business district, but when Sakaja attempted to reorganize how Nairobi's CBD functions, his popularity suddenly dropped. Why would a plan to organize Nairobi trigger protests and political backlash? The answer may determine the future of the city, and Sakaja's political future. Because fixing a major city is never just about policy, it's about politics. Nairobi is one of Africa's most important cities. It hosts the United Nations, multinational corporations, and one of the fastest growing tech ecosystems on the continent. But every morning, the same question returns. How can a city this important still struggle with something as basic as traffic, congestion, and urban order? And here's what makes the Sakaja story puzzling. Why would efforts to organize the city make the governor less popular? Under Governor Evans Kidero, the city attempted modernization projects, but residents still struggled with waste management, congestion, and uneven service delivery. His successor, Mike Sonko, brought populist energy and visibility, but Nairobi soon found itself trapped in political drama, administrative paralysis, and eventually national government intervention in several county functions. In 2022, Nairobi elected one of the youngest governors in the city's history. Johnson Sakaja promised to restore order, modernize services, and make the capital work again. But within just 4 months of taking office, a single policy decision triggered protests, political clashes, and a sharp drop in Sakaja's public approval ratings. The question is, was this a political mistake or the unavoidable cost of trying to fix Nairobi? Johnson Sakaja's rise in Kenyan politics has been unusually rapid. He first gained national prominence through youth leadership and party organization, eventually becoming chairman of the TNA party, one of the political vehicles that propelled President Uhuru Kenyatta to power in 2013. At just 28 years old, Sakaja entered parliament as one of the youngest lawmakers in the country. By 2017, he had been elected senator for Nairobi County, gaining national visibility as one of the capital's most articulate political figures. But in 2022, Sakaja set his sights on the city's most difficult job, Governor of Nairobi. His campaign manifesto focused on a few clear priorities: restoring order in the CBD, improving revenue collection, expanding social services, modernizing transport management, and rebuilding Nairobi's reputation as a functioning modern capital. But here's the part many Nairobi residents didn't fully see during the campaign. Winning the election was actually the easiest part of Sakaja's job, because the real test began the moment he stepped into City Hall, where he would have to govern a city facing deep administrative problems while navigating a county assembly that he did not fully control. And that political balancing act would quietly shape almost every decision his administration made. Johnson Sakaja walked into office facing two battles at the same time. The first was administrative. Years of governance instability had weakened key systems inside the county government, from revenue collection to urban management. But Sakaja's biggest challenge wasn't just administrative, it was political. Because the Nairobi County Assembly he had to work with was deeply divided. The Speaker, Majority Leader, and several key committee chairs were not aligned with his UDA party. In practical terms, this meant one thing. Every major decision required negotiation. Every policy required coalition building. Every budget required careful political management. So Sakaja responded with a strategy that seasoned political observers quickly recognized. Instead of confrontation, he moved toward accommodation. He began assembling something closer to a coalition-style county government. Rather than build a purely partisan administration, Sakaja assembled something closer to a broad-based county government. Appointments reflected a mix of political interests and technocratic expertise. Different factions inside Nairobi's political landscape were represented. The approach helped stabilize City Hall after years of turbulence. But stability in politics does not always translate into popularity with the public. Because almost immediately, Sakaja faced the most controversial decision of his early governorship. A decision that urban planners had been recommending for years. A decision that many experts said Nairobi could no longer avoid, and yet a decision almost guaranteed to trigger political backlash. The question was simple. Could Nairobi finally confront its congestion problem without triggering a political storm? For years, urban planners had warned that Nairobi's CBD was becoming unsustainable. Long-distance matatus were driving directly into the city center. Wholesale produce markets were spilling into streets designed for pedestrians. The result was a daily mixture of congestion, noise, pollution, and constant safety risks. So Sakaja moved forward with a plan that many experts had long recommended. Relocate long-distance matatus to designated termini, including the Green Park Terminus, and move wholesale produce traders from the congested Wakulima and Marikiti markets to the new Wakulima Market along Kangundo Road. On paper, the policy made sense. In practice, it triggered a political storm. Transport operators resisted relocation, traders protested the move. And then, the issue took on a larger political dimension. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua publicly criticized the relocation plan, arguing that many of the traders affected were small-scale entrepreneurs from the Mount Kenya region. What began as a city planning decision quickly evolved into a full-blown political confrontation. Public approval ratings for Governor Sakaja began to drop. Opinion polls reflected growing frustration among traders and transport operators. Media coverage focused heavily on protests and confrontations. But politics has a way of magnifying conflict while overlooking quieter changes happening behind the scenes. Because even as the headlines focused on protests, other positive developments were taking place inside the county government. Revenue collection in Nairobi began to improve compared with previous years. Digital systems were gradually tightening leakages that had plagued the county for decades. Social services expanded, particularly in health facilities and early childhood education programs. Infrastructure maintenance slowly improved in several parts of the city. And perhaps most importantly, Nairobi's county government began working more closely with the national government to address long-term structural urban challenges, including transport infrastructure, affordable housing, and drainage systems. These are not always the most dramatic headlines, but they are often the building blocks of long-term urban recovery. And while politics often focuses on the loudest confrontations, another way to understand what's happening inside City Hall is to look at something far less dramatic: the audit trail of how the county government manages its finances. Auditor General reports show that Nairobi County has faced financial audit queries under every governor since devolution began in 2013. During the Kidero and Sonko administrations, several billions in procurement and revenue discrepancies were flagged, including revenue gaps estimated at over 18 billion shillings during the Sonko era. Early audit queries during Governor Johnson Sakaja administration focused more on documentation gaps, payroll verification issues, and accounting classification errors. Serious concerns, yes, but generally smaller in scale than the systemic revenue gaps identified in previous administrations. Audits raise questions for verification. They do not necessarily mean funds were lost, and Nairobi would not be the first Kenyan city where difficult urban reforms triggered political backlash before their long-term effects became visible. Before deciding whether Sakaja's reforms are political suicide, it may be worth remembering what happened the last time a Kenyan governor tried something very similar. Because in another major Kenyan city, an almost identical decongestion plan once triggered protests that looked remarkably familiar. When Professor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o first became governor of KISUMU in 2017, he launched an aggressive plan to decongest the city centre, and the reaction was immediate. Traders who profit directly from the chaos protested loudly. Poll numbers dropped. Streets were filled with noisy demonstrations. Critics said the governor had destroyed his political future. But Nyong'o stayed the course. Markets were reorganized. Traffic systems were redesigned. Public spaces were cleared. So here's the question. What do you think voters did at the next election? When KISUMU voters returned to the ballot box in 2022, they delivered a surprising verdict that completely changed the political conversation. The silent majority of KISUMU residents re-elected Professor Nyong'o with an overwhelming 75% of the vote. Today, KISUMU's urban transformation is widely regarded as one of Kenya's most successful county reforms, which brings Nairobi to a difficult but necessary question. As Nairobi begins to think about the politics of 2027, one question quietly sits beneath the noise. Is the push to replace Johnson Sakaja in 2027 really about improving the city? Or is it about returning to the familiar chaos of an overcrowded CBD? More matatus in the streets, more market congestion, more noise, more pollution, more floods. Urban reform has never been popular. But cities that refuse to confront congestion eventually pay a higher price. And as KISUMU's story shows, today's unpopular decisions can sometimes become tomorrow's quiet success. The real question for Nairobi residents may not be whether Sakaja's reforms were comfortable, but whether they were necessary and whether the city is ready to stay the course. Because sometimes the hardest decisions in city leadership are also the ones that shape its future. And in the end, the future of Nairobi may not be decided by who promises the most, but by whether the city is willing to accept the cost of fixing itself. In most cities, a governor's performance is judged by what people live through every day. The traffic that refuses to move, the streets that feel overcrowded, the garbage that doesn't get collected, the noise, the disorder, even the floods when the rains come. And in many ways, all of these problems trace back to one central issue: congestion. But solving congestion is not just a technical decision. It is a political one. In KISUMU, Governor Peter Anyang' Nyong'o pushed through similar reforms with the full backing of a unified political structure under Raila Odinga. In Nairobi, Governor Johnson Sakaja was attempting the same kind of reforms without a corresponding level of political support, and the politics held him back, and Nairobi's future is still being written. Nairobi residents, let's have an honest conversation. Do you support Sakaja's effort to move long-distance matatus and wholesale markets out of the CBD? Or should the CBD remain open to matatus and wholesale markets as it's been for decades? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We're genuinely curious what Nairobi residents think. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our Kenya 2027 Watch channel, and share this video widely to help us bring a large community of Kenyans into the conversation. We're here on a serious mission to separate the facts from the propaganda.